In this video, I will explain about ethics in educational research. Ethics, well, when we talk about ethics in research, it concerns the responsibility of researchers to be honest and respectful to all individuals who are affected by their research studies or their reports of the study's results. For example, of course, the participants. It can also concern the institutions of the participants and other related parties. Ethics also have very close relation with human rights and democracy. So, in this case, the rights of people should be protected, particularly in those who are vulnerable. Previously, I explained that the most important thing in research, in conducting research, is to have a research question. That is true. But of course, before we have certain research questions, we should underlie our research with good intentions. We are doing research to do good, not to do harm. That's why our research questions should be underlined, should be based on good intentions. And this is very, very important. So ethics concern our underlying purposes. What we intend to do should be good. That should be the first thing before anything when we are conducting a research or a scientific study. The idea of research ethics, of course, comes from history. We in the past had several recorded unethical practices. So research ethics actually stem from research or scientific studies in science, such as biology or medical field. For example, we have in 1963, we have patients that had been injected with live cancer cells. And then in Alabama, we have 400 men that had been left to suffer with syphilis long after the cure, that is penicillin, was available. So if we take a look at only the point of view of science, of course, these two studies have their own purposes. Of course, perhaps the first case, they wanted to study up close how cancer cells work and then perhaps to find the cure. But then the way they conducted the research was highly unethical, right? Because they injected cancer cells to participants. So this is highly unethical. The same goes for the second case, They already found the cure for syphilis, but then they let these 400 men suffer only because they wanted to research syphilis in more detail. Because of such practices, and also some other practices in the past, which were unethical, then people started to think about better ways of conducting research. Because of this dark history of conducting research in the past, people begin to think on how we can actually conduct research in more respected and respectful manner. That is to respect the participants of our research and maintaining the principles of research ethics. In the BELMONT report, researchers need to do certain steps, need to do or maintain certain principles while they are conducting research. 3 of them I provide here. Participants should consent or should agree to participate in studies, and those who cannot give their consent, such as children, people with diminished abilities, and prisoners, need to be protected. Second, the researchers do not harm the participants, minimize risks, and maximize possible benefits. And then the last, fairness in procedures for selecting participants. I will explain one by one. So, the participants should consent. That means they should agree. They should agree to participate. If they do not agree, then the researchers should not force the participants to participate. So that is, they need to consent. They should willingly agree to participate. For example, children, they cannot really say yes. They cannot really say no because they cannot really decide. So in that case, their parents should consent their children to participate in the research. This also includes people with diminished abilities, or for example, participants with special needs, and also prisoners because they do not have many options, right? Maybe they are afraid if they say no, right? They do not really have any choice. So these people, these participants, need to be protected. It's also related to number 2, the researchers do not harm participants, minimize risks, and maximize possible benefits. For example, when we are inviting participants to interview, it seems that we will not harm them physically, perhaps, but then, for example, our interview lasts for too long, let's say 1 hour and a half. That means we do harm to the participants because we take their time too much, which of course otherwise they could use for other activities or perhaps earning money. And then, for example, researchers ask participants to fill questionnaire, very long questionnaires that it needs 30 minutes of working, 30 minutes of filling the questionnaire alone. I think in that case, the researchers are already doing some harms to the participants. Because to fill a questionnaire and to spend 30 minutes for that is a bit too much. Because they will need to think very hard to fill your questionnaires. And then fairness in procedure for selecting participants. For example, researchers should not select the participants in a way that perhaps can make the participants embarrassed or ashamed. For example, you want to interview students who you think perform not really well in class. And then you announce that in public. So it may embarrass the participants. And it also harms them psychologically. So you should avoid such practices. There are 4 basic principles of research ethics. Perhaps I have mentioned some of them in my earlier explanations. We have autonomy. So participants should consent. That means they should agree to participate willingly. If they are not willing to participate, of course, they should not participate and the researchers should not force them to participate. If they do not wish to participate, nobody should force them otherwise. That is autonomy. Autonomy means freedom, means independence. That means they are free. They are independent whether or not they want to participate in our research or they don't want to participate. And then beneficence. That is doing good. Minimizing risks, maximizing possible benefits. If you can make your questionnaire to be completed in 5 minutes or 3 minutes, why would you make your questionnaire to be completed in 30 minutes? Yeah? We need to minimize the risks and maximize the possible benefits. And then non-maleficence or no harm. Of course, that is the opposite of beneficence. We as researchers should not harm the participants physically or psychologically or in any other possible ways of harming them. No, we cannot do that. Embarrassing them? No, we cannot do that. And then justice. We have already talked about it earlier. Perhaps I should emphasize this. The needs of participants should come first before the researchers' needs. For example, you need to interview certain participants. But then the participants that you contact say that they are busy. They need to do this, this, this. In that case, it is you who should be mindful. It's you that should adjust your schedule to their schedule. Why? Because you should put the needs of the participants first before your needs. It's you who need to conduct the research, so it is your job to adjust your schedule to their schedule, not the other way around. And then there are some important terminologies in research ethics that perhaps you really need to understand. Non-maleficence, we have talked about this. Protecting participants from physical and psychological harm. Yeah. It also includes possible embarrassment. If you are interviewing participants, do not let your participants feel that they are very stupid, for example. You ask very difficult questions with terminologies that they do not understand. It sounds very trivial, but then for the participants, they will feel that they are not capable enough. They may be embarrassed and ashamed. And after the interview has finished, they may feel bad about themselves. So something like this should be avoided. And then voluntary participation. It is also related to the concept that I explained earlier, that is about autonomy, independence, of freedom. So research should guarantee voluntary participation. If participants want to participate, if somebody wants to participate, then very good for you. But then if that person is not willing to participate, you should never force them. That is the key of voluntary participation and autonomy. We need to be careful, however, in some cases, participants may feel coerced to participate or perceive that they have limited choice. For example, prisoners, yeah? And perhaps this case is very close to our surrounding, teacher-student relationship. So, for example, you are my students, and then I need to conduct research. And then I want you to participate in my research. You, as my students, may feel coerced to participate. You may feel that you are compelled to participate because the researcher is your teacher. It's like you do not have any choice. Because perhaps, for example, you do not help me, it may affect your grade negatively. You may be afraid of that. You need to be careful with something like this. So, for example, I'm your teacher, and then I need to conduct research with you as the participants. Even though you are my students, you still have all the rights that we already explained here, we already discussed here about voluntary participations and autonomy. So, if you are willing to participate, good for me. If you are not willing to participate, even though I'm your teacher, I should not force you. This is something that everybody should understand. And then let's talk about deception. We have what we call passive deception and active deception. To decept or deception, that is to lie. We have passive lying and then we have active lying. Passive deceptions, or we call it omission, is the withholding or omitting of information. So in this case, the researcher intentionally does not tell participants some information about the study. So there are certain details about the study, and then the participants are only informed parts of them. This is what we call passive deception. Active deception, that is what we call commission, is presenting of misinformation about the study to participants. For example, the most common form of active deception is misleading participants about the specific purpose of the study. Misleading, misinformation. Passive deception can happen in certain contexts or certain situations. For example, actually we can share all the information about the study, but then the participants may feel that it is not really necessary. They may think that it is too much for them to know. So perhaps we can keep them for ourselves and we do not share it to the participants. At times, passive deception can be okay. But active deception is really discouraged. Do not do any active deception in your research. The next term, that is confidentiality. Confidentiality, that is secret, something secret. Researchers must ensure the confidentiality of their research participants. They have to ensure that participants' record or identifying information is kept anonymous. So we talk about secret, something confidential. We have what we call here identifying information. What is identifying information? Identifying information is information which could identify the participants. When, for example, we write the report and somebody else read our report. Some examples of identifying information is, of course, real names. So, for example, if I do research with my students as the participants, and then I use their real names, of course, later when I write the report and many people read the reports, they will know my students' real names and they can perhaps track these participants. So this is unethical. You should not use participants' real names in your report. That's why you can conceal or hide their real names with pseudonyms to protect their confidentiality. Another identifying information can be institutions or universities and then high schools, the names of the institutions. So for example, I do not use real names. I already use pseudonyms, but then I disclose or I state explicitly the institution in which I do the research. It may protect the participants' confidentiality, but it may not protect the institution confidentiality. And it may do harm to the institution's name in one way or another. So, it's better for us as researchers to keep the confidentiality of participants and all the related parties that may be affected by the results of our study. The next is informed consent. Informed consent is the most essential part of research ethics. So this is the consent that the participants give to participate in the research after they are informed of the purposes of the study, their rights as participants, and other details related to the study. So essentially, before they give their consent to participate in the research, they should be informed of the details of the study. And it is our task as researchers to inform them. So the participants give consent. They say, yes, I will participate, only after they fully understand the details of the study and all of their rights as participants. The most practical way to obtain participants' informed consent is through providing them with consent form. So consent form, as the name suggests, it's a form in which the participants fill to indicate their participations. A good consent form will reflect the researcher's efforts to maintain the principles of research ethics. This is an example of consent form. It was used for my dissertation study when I completed my master's degree. So here I wrote the title of the project or the title of my dissertation, and then my identity, and then here I provided them with what my study was about. And then I wrote here there are 33 items and it should take 10 minutes for you to complete, something like that. So it gave the participant candidates some idea about our research and the efforts that they need to prepare in order to participate in the study. And then after they understand about the study or the research, they will need to provide their consent indicated with the signature. With my signature below, I indicate that first, my participation in this survey is voluntary, can be withdrawn at any time. Number 2, and so on. Number 3, so on and so forth. If you read carefully the contents of this informed consent form, you will see that actually these items are the manifestation of the principles of research ethics. And then, for example, later your research is using mixed method. After you distribute questionnaire, you will conduct interviews. Then you will need their contact, right? In that case, you will ask them to provide their contacts if they are willing to participate in your study. There are several other important terms that you need to study deeper in relation with research ethics. First, the differences between informed consent and informed consent form. So, informed consent is the consent of the participants based on their being informed of the purposes of the study, whereas informed consent form is the form in which the participants indicate their willingness to participate in their study based on their being informed of the purposes of the study. And then pseudonyms, you already know about it when we discuss confidentiality, and then identifying information. And then number 4, subjects versus participants. In the light of research ethics, rather than calling the people participating in our study subjects, we should call them participants. Participants are people who participate in our study, whereas subjects here, if you take a look at dictionary, subjects are people who are subjected to do something, who are compelled to do something, who are ordered to do something. Therefore, the term participants suggests a more equal relationship between the researchers and the people being involved in the study than the term subject. If we use the term subject, it means that the researchers are somehow above or higher than the people involved in the study. And therefore, the term participants will be more appropriate to be used. And then the last but not least is gatekeeper consent. So this is essentially the agreement that's given by the gatekeeper. So who is the gatekeeper? The gatekeeper is the one that is in charge of certain institution or certain area in which we want to conduct the research. For example, you want to conduct a research in a study program or in a certain department, then the gatekeeper would be the head of the department. If you want to conduct research in a class, of course, you will need the permission of the class teacher. In this case, the teacher is the gatekeeper. But then, is it enough to get the gatekeeper consent? The answer would be not enough. It is not enough. So, when we are doing research, we need to obtain the gatekeeper consent first. But then, of course, at the end, we will still need to get the consent of the participants. For instance, you want to research students of a certain university, you will need to talk to the head of the university. But then, at the end, you will need the consent of each student of the university, whether or not each of them wants to participate in your study. Even though the head of the university is willing to help you, if the individual students at that university are not willing to participate, then you still cannot force them to participate. I hope this video is useful for your study. Thank you very much.